Hello Math 8 students, this is Solving Equations, Variable on Both Sides practice. It is a continuation of writing equations practice. So that's why it starts with number 7, because we're continuing from a previous lesson. We're going to solve each equation. As we solve each of these equations, again, the title tells us we need to notice that there are variables on both sides. And so when I have 12 plus 7x equal to 4x minus 3, I can see that since I have 7x here and 4x here, I can't make a flow map saying this is what's happening to x, because we have x in two different places. We also cannot combine these because I have 7x on one side of the scale and 4x on another side of the scale. So I can't combine them and join them together. What I can do is I can always remove 4x from one side of the scale as long as I do the same thing to the other side and remove 4x from the other side. Key thing is we have an equal sign, we have an equation, so anything that I do to one side needs to be done to the other. 4x minus 4x zeroes out. 7x minus 4x is equal to 3x. Don't want to forget that I still have plus 12, and that all of that is equal to negative 3. Now, we could always make a flow map if we needed to. X is multiplied by 3, and then we add 12. So I can undo adding 12 by subtracting 12 and balance it by doing the same thing to the other side. This leaves me with 3x, which is equal to negative 3 minus 12 is negative 15. And now with one solving step left, I simply divide each side by 3. And I'm left with x is equal to negative 15 divided by 3 is a negative 5. And that's it. There's a lot here to practice. You're going to see that 8 and 9 are very, very similar. So I will continue to go through those and solve them. I think it's a good idea to pause the recording and try them on your own, only continuing the recording when you're ready to see the answers. Continuing right along, as I'm looking at a balanced scale, I can see 8 negatives and 6 negatives on the other side. I can, whatever I do to one side, I can always do to the other side, but what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm getting rid of the negatives by adding positives. Negative 8x will zero out when I add positive 8x, and balancing it, doing the same thing to the other side. Means now I'm left with negative 4, which is equal to negative 6x plus 8x is equal to 2x, and I still have minus 12 on left over. Now I have x in just one place, so now I can solve by thinking of a flow map. X is multiplied by 2, and then we subtract a 12. I'll undo subtracting 12 by adding 12 and balance it, doing the same thing to the other side. This leaves me with negative 4 plus 12, which is equal to 8, and that's balanced with 2x. Just one solving step left. X is multiplied by 2, which I undo by dividing by 2. Balancing it, doing the same thing to the other side. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and that is equal to x. It is worth mentioning and worth pointing out that this is just one step that I could have taken, and if I rewrite this problem again so I can show it another way, it is not the only first step that I could have taken. I could have decided, instead of adding 8x, I could have decided to zero out the 6 negative x's on the right-hand side. I would zero out these 6 negative x's by adding 6x and balancing it on the other side. This zeroes out the right-hand x's, and now it leaves me with negative 8x plus 6x is actually negative 2x minus 4, which is equal to negative 12. Now, this looks very similar, but also different to the equation that we were left with over here. I can see x is now multiplied by a negative 2, and then I subtract 4. I undo subtracting 4 by adding 4 and balance it by doing the same thing to the other side. And now I have negative 2x, which is equal to negative 12 plus 4 is negative 8. And again, you can compare and see how very similar this is. Here I had 8 equals 2x. Now I have negative 2x equals negative 8. Everything will still end up the same as long as I continue taking the correct solving steps. X is multiplied by a -2, so I will undo by dividing by a -2 and balancing it on the other side. A -2 divided by -2 divides out, leaving me with X, which is equal to -8 divided by -2 is a +4. So I ended up with the exact same answer, shown two different ways. This just goes to show you it doesn't matter which you decide to take for your first step, as long as you're balancing it and doing the same thing to the other side. Moving along to number 9, now I'm switching up the variable and now I'm using b. I usually like to collect all of the variables to one side. So 3b plus 3 is equal to 2b minus 4. I'm going to remove the 2b. I could decide to take care of the unit tiles first. It's just my personal preference to try and collect all of the variables to one side. 2b minus 2b zeroes out, and 3b minus 2b is equal to b plus 3 is still equal to -4. Now I have just one solving step left. B plus 3 will be undone by subtracting 3. And I balance it and do the same thing to the other side. Now I have b is equal to -4 minus 3 is equal to -7. From here on out, you're going to start seeing some things, and that is you have to start simplifying before you can solve. Not only do I have x on both sides, in number 12, I have x's in two different places on the left-hand side, as well as an x on the right-hand side. In 10 and 11, I can see that I have x's within groups. So before I can start moving around those x's, on 10 through 14, I have to simplify before I begin solving. Go ahead and give those ones a try first, and we'll come back together to go over them on the video. Pause the recording now. Okay, so when I look at number 10, I see that I need to simplify before I can start moving those x's around and solving. I have two groups of 6x, which is 12x, and two groups of -8, which is -16. So 12x minus 16, and that is equal to 4x. The next thing, I need to try and move the x's to one place. The most instinctive is that we try and subtract 4x to zero out these 4x. That way I only have positive x's. Unfortunately, if I do that, 4x minus 4x is going to leave us with no x's, and that means there will be nothing over here on the right-hand side. That is okay. We can say we're left with nothing, and 12x minus 4x is equal to 8x minus 16. Now the x's are in one place, but I still have to take two steps to solve that equation. So it is going to work, but it is probably not the best move that we could make. Instead of subtracting 4x, since that will leave me with nothing, if instead I decide to subtract 12x, now it's going to zero out the x's on the left-hand side, and I will have 4x minus 12x is equal to -8x. And that's going to be equal to, since the 12x has zeroed out now, I have just -16. This is a little bit more comfortable. Even though I have negative x's, it's more comfortable because I have something on each side instead of having nothing on one of the sides. Just one solving step left. X is multiplied by -8, and I will undo multiplying by -8 by dividing by -8. -8 divided by -8 divides out, and I'm left with x, which is equal to -16 divided by -8 is a +2. On the remaining problems, you're going to make sure that you want to simplify before you begin solving. Number 11, 8 plus 7x is simplified on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, that's where I can do the simplifying. 4 groups of x is 4x, and 4 groups of subtracting 4 is subtracting 16. Now that right hand is simplified, and that is equal to 8 plus 7x on the left-hand side. Again, I like to collect the x's to one side, so my next solving step is going to be subtracting 4x, so I no longer have x's on the right-hand side, and we'll balance it by doing the same thing to the other side. This leaves me with 8 plus 3x, which is equal to -16. x is multiplied by 3 and then we add 8, which I now will subtract 8 to undo. That leaves me with 3x, which is equal to negative 16 minus 8, be careful with your negatives here, is equal to a negative 24. And now one solving step left, I will just divide each side by 3, and I get x is equal to a negative 8. On number 12, as I simplify before I begin solving, I'm simplifying in a different way. There are no parentheses, so no multiple groups, but I do have x in multiple places. So I need to combine my x tiles first, and then I can start moving the x tiles from one side to the other. Negative 7x and 13 positive x are going to combine to be 6x. I still have my plus 2 unit tiles. That takes care of the left-hand side, which is now simplified, and it is equal to x minus 13 on the right-hand side. Now that each side is simplified, now I'm going to collect the x's to one side by removing this x tile and doing the same thing to the other side. 6x minus x is equal to 5x plus my 2 unit tiles, which is equal to negative 3. I will undo adding 2 by subtracting 2, balancing and doing the same thing to the other side. And that leaves me with 5x is equal to, again, watch your negatives here, negative 3 minus 2 is equal to negative 5. One solving step left. I will undo x being multiplied by 5 by dividing each side by 5, and I get x is equal to negative 5 divided by 5 is equal to a negative 1. On number 13, we have both sides of the equation that need to be simplified before we solve. So that is going to look something like this. Combining all of my x tiles into one place, x and negative x, and on the right hand side combining all of my unit tiles into one place, negative 1 and negative 4. On the left-hand side, an x tile and 9 negative x tiles combine to be negative 8x. I still have those 25 unit tiles, so I bring that down. On the right-hand side, I'm combining 1 negative unit tile with 4 negative unit tiles to give me negative 5. And again, I don't have anything to combine with these 5 negative x tiles, so they come straight down into the problem. Now each side has been simplified, and now I can begin solving. I like focusing on moving the x tiles to one place, and I get to make a choice now. I can either add 8x to each side to zero out the x's here, or I could add 5x to zero out these 5 negative x tiles. Whatever it is that you decide, just make sure you do it the same thing to the other side. Personally, I'm going to choose to add 8x. In doing so, this zeroes out, and I balance it doing the same thing to the other side. The reason I chose this is because negative 5x plus 8x is equal to a positive 3x. And anytime I can avoid dealing with negatives, I like avoiding that. This has now been zeroed out, but I still have those 25 unit tiles, so now my equation is 25 equals 3x minus 5, and I can begin solving. I undo subtracting 5 by adding 5 and balance it by doing the same thing to the other side. That leaves me with 30, which is equal to, since that zeroed out, it's equal to 3x. Just one solving step left. I divide each side by 3, and I get 10 is equal to x. Number 14. Simplify the left-hand side, simplify the right-hand side, and then you can begin solving. On the left-hand side, I have 6x tiles and 4x tiles that will combine to be 10x tiles, and the 2 negative units that come straight down. I also have 2 groups of 6x tiles on the right-hand side, 2 groups of 3x tiles, which equal 6x tiles, and 2 groups of negative 7, which is negative 14. Now each side has been simplified, so now I can begin solving. Since I have 10x tiles on the left-hand side and 6x tiles on the right-hand side, I'm going to zero out these 6x tiles by removing them, and balancing it, doing the same thing to the other side. 10x minus 6x is 4x minus 2 is equal to negative 14. I undo subtracting 2 by adding 2. And now I have just 4x tiles equal to negative 14 plus 2 is negative 12. And one solving step left. I undo x being multiplied by 4 by dividing by 4 and balance it, doing the same thing to the other side, leaving me with x, which is equal to a negative 3. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.